Close your eyes, and imagine a quiet desert night. The air is cool, though the day has been hot. Sand stretches far beyond the horizon, and the faint glow of the moon brushes across ancient stones, some fallen, some standing, each carrying stories of a civilization that once flourished here. The desert has always been a place of silence, a place where time feels slower, where the past lingers close to the surface. And in this silence, we begin our journey, not with noise or urgency, but with gentle reflection, into the story of one of the world's most mysterious and important objects, the Rosetta Stone. The Rosetta Stone is not large or golden. It is not a sparkling jewel or a towering monument. It is, in fact, a broken piece of dark stone, heavy and solid, its top chipped away by centuries of wear. And yet, this stone carries within it a key. A key not to a locked door, but to an entire world, a language, a culture, a forgotten voice. The story of the Rosetta Stone is, in many ways, the story of how humanity regained the ability to hear the whispers of ancient Egypt. For hundreds of years, the voices of the pharaohs had been silent. Their words carved into temple walls, their stories drawn across tombs and monuments, but no one could read them. They were like dreams half-remembered, present yet unreachable. As you lie still, listening to this tale, think of the way mysteries linger in our minds. There is something deeply soothing about a puzzle, something that invites us to slow down and let our curiosity breathe. The Rosetta Stone is exactly such a puzzle, an ancient riddle, hidden in plain sight, waiting for patient minds to unlock it. Long before it was found, Egypt itself had already fascinated the world. Travelers from Greece and Rome marveled at its pyramids, its temples, its great river. But after the ancient world faded, Egypt's language, the sacred hieroglyphs, slipped into silence. Generations of scholars stared at the carved pictures of birds, eyes, suns, and animals, unable to read them. Some believed the symbols were purely decorative, art without meaning. Others imagined them as mystical codes, secrets of priests and gods, forever hidden. For centuries, the truth remained locked away, just beyond reach. And then, almost by accident, a piece of that truth resurfaced. In the summer of 1799, during Napoleon's campaign in Egypt, French soldiers were repairing an old fort near the town of Rosetta, now called Rashid. As they dug into the earth, they uncovered something unusual, a large slab of stone, covered with inscriptions. Soldiers are not often scholars, but even they could tell this was something extraordinary. 3 different scripts were carved into its surface, neat rows of characters, some ancient and strange, others more familiar. The discovery passed from soldiers to officers, and soon to scholars, and whispers of its importance began to spread. But that moment, that uncovering of stone from sand, was only the beginning of its long journey. In time, it would cross oceans, move through wars, and become the centerpiece of scholarly battles. And yet, beyond all of that, the Rosetta Stone remains, at its heart, a bridge between worlds, the ancient and the modern, the silent and the spoken, the forgotten and the remembered. As we drift deeper into this story, imagine holding the stone in your mind. Smooth to the touch, heavy with history, its surface carved by steady hands over 2,000 years ago. The words it carries are not loud, not forceful. They do not shout. Instead, they wait quietly, patiently, for someone to listen. Like a lullaby from the past, they rest in silence until the right moment comes to be heard again. This chapter, our beginning, is not about answers, but about stillness. It is about stepping into the long corridor of history, where shadows and echoes guide us. The Rosetta Stone is not simply an object. It is a reminder of the patience of time, the persistence of human curiosity, and the quiet resilience of memory. Consider for a moment how many lives have touched this stone. Ancient priests who carved its message. Soldiers who buried and unearthed it. Scholars who bent over it, copying its letters by candlelight. Travelers who stood before it, gazing with awe. And now, you too, listening to this story in the calm of night, become part of its long chain of witnesses. You may never touch it, but through your imagination, you hold it, you see it, and in some way, you join its history. The Rosetta Stone is not loud. It does not need to be. It speaks in whispers, like the desert wind against forgotten ruins. It speaks in the rhythm of time, in patience, in calm persistence. And tonight, as we begin our journey through its tale, it invites you to slow down, to listen closely, and to drift with it, deeper and deeper into history's embrace. So let this be our gentle opening. We stand at the threshold of a story that is at once ancient and timeless. Ahead lie discoveries, triumphs, frustrations, and wonders. But here, in the quiet of this first chapter, we simply acknowledge the stone itself, a fragment of the past, carrying more meaning than anyone could have imagined when it was first lifted from the ground. Breathe slowly. Feel the calm of history surrounding you, like the cool night air of the desert. The Rosetta Stone waits, patient and silent, and we are ready to begin. Before the Rosetta Stone was lifted from the soil, before soldiers and scholars laid their eyes upon it, there was silence. Not the silence of an empty desert, but the silence of words that could not be understood. For centuries, the language of ancient Egypt had been lost. Its temples still stood. Its pyramids still rose against the horizon. The Nile still flowed as it always had. But the voice of Egypt, the words of its kings, its priests, its people, had become quiet, unreachable, hidden behind symbols no one alive could read. Imagine standing before a wall in Thebes, or in Memphis, or in Luxor. The stone surface glitters faintly in the sun. Carved into it are figures, lines of birds, reeds, eyes, lions, and strange shapes. The carvings are neat, purposeful, clearly meant to be read. But for thousands of years, no one could. Travelers from Europe, curious and eager, walked among the ruins. They copied the symbols into notebooks. They marveled at the artistry, but the meaning was gone. The language had been swallowed by time. It had not always been so. In the days of the pharaohs, hieroglyphs carried the deepest voices of Egypt. They recorded prayers, laws, victories, and rituals. Priests read them aloud in temples, believing the carved words themselves held sacred power. But as centuries passed, dynasties fell. New empires swept over the Nile. The Greeks came, then the Romans, then the early Christians. Little by little, the old language faded. Fewer people could read the symbols. Eventually, no one could. By the time the Middle Ages arrived, the language of Egypt's ancestors was completely silent. This silence was not only the loss of words. It was the loss of memory. Without the ability to read the texts, no one could truly know what the Egyptians had believed, how they saw their gods, or how they recorded their lives. People speculated. Some said hieroglyphs were mystical charms, magical symbols that contained secrets too deep for ordinary minds. Others thought they were nothing more than elaborate decoration. But the truth remained hidden, and the voice of Egypt slept. And yet, Egypt itself never truly disappeared. Travelers still came, crossing deserts and sailing down the Nile. They saw statues of pharaohs with calm faces carved in stone. They walked through ruined temples whose columns rose like forests of rock. They entered tombs painted with colorful scenes of gods and humans, animals and stars. The land of Egypt remained a place of wonder, but without its language, it was a mystery, grand but mute. By the 15th and 16th centuries, European explorers began returning to Egypt more often. The Renaissance had stirred a hunger for knowledge, and ancient ruins were fascinating treasures. Sketches of hieroglyphs appeared in books, copied carefully by hand. Scholars stared at the strange figures, trying to make sense of them. Some thought each symbol represented an entire idea, while others guessed they were secret letters. But there was no key, no way to test their theories. Egypt's silence endured. Think of how it must have felt, to stand surrounded by thousands of inscriptions, knowing they were full of meaning, yet unable to hear them. It is like standing in a library where every book is locked shut, or hearing a song played without words. You sense there is something profound before you, but you cannot touch it. That was Egypt before the Rosetta Stone, beautiful, mysterious, but silent. And the silence did not just affect scholars. It shaped the imagination of all who saw Egypt. Writers described it as a land of secrets, of hidden wisdom. Painters imagined its priests and temples as keepers of forbidden knowledge. The hieroglyphs became symbols of mystery itself, their unreadable shapes fueling legends. Egypt was not only ancient, it was unknowable. But silence is never permanent. Somewhere beneath the surface of history, the voice of Egypt waited. Its words were carved into stone, unchanging, enduring the rise and fall of empires. All that was needed was a key. A way to connect the past with the present. A way to bridge the gap between the unreadable symbols and the languages still spoken. And so, the world stood on the edge of discovery. For centuries, Egypt had been quiet, its words locked away. But fate would soon intervene, in the form of a broken stone, unearthed by chance. That stone would carry the same message 3 times, in 3 different scripts, like 3 echoes of the same voice. One of those scripts, Greek, could still be read. The others, demotic and hieroglyphic, waited for their meanings to be uncovered. But that moment, the moment of discovery, had not yet arrived. In the centuries before 1799, Egypt remained a land of silent walls and unreadable texts. Travelers gazed at the pyramids, merchants sailed along the Nile, and artists sketched the ruins. But none could hear the voices of the past. The pharaoh's decrees, the priests' prayers, the stories of gods and kings, all of it lay hidden, silent, just beneath the surface. It is a humbling thought, isn't it? That a civilization so great, so vast, could lose its voice for so long. The monuments remained, the art remained, the river remained. But without words, the deepest part of its soul was gone. Silence can be peaceful, but it can also be heavy. The silence of Egypt was heavy, pressing, a silence of waiting. As you breathe slowly now, drifting deeper into calm, think of that silence. Imagine walking along the Nile in the 15th century, with the stars above you and the ruins around you. You see carved walls glowing faintly in the moonlight. You know they are speaking, but you cannot understand. You feel a longing, a quiet pull, to hear the voices within the stone. But the desert air carries no answers. The walls remain still. The words remain locked. This was Egypt before the Rosetta Stone. A land alive with history, but silent in its speech. A land waiting patiently, as only history can, for the moment when its voice would return. And so, the silence stretched across centuries, until one summer day in 1799, when the earth would give up its secret. Until then, Egypt dreamed quietly, its language sleeping like a lullaby waiting to be sung again. The year was 1799. Europe was alive with wars and empires, with ambition and conquest. Napoleon Bonaparte, the young general of France, had set his eyes on Egypt. To him, Egypt was not only a strategic land, a bridge between continents, but also a place of mystery and glory. By capturing Egypt, he sought not only to challenge Britain but also to step into the shadow of the pharaohs. And so, with his soldiers, he sailed across the Mediterranean and brought with him not only an army but also a company of scholars, engineers, and artists. For Napoleon, conquest was not just about battle, it was about knowledge. Amid the battles and marches, the French soldiers worked on fortifications, repairing old structures and strengthening their hold on the land. In the summer heat, near a small town along the Nile Delta known as Rosetta, today called Rashid, a group of soldiers began to dig. The fort they were repairing was an old one, its walls worn by centuries of shifting powers. They dug into the soil, moving earth and stone, not expecting to find anything more than rubble. But history often waits in silence, ready to reveal itself when least expected. On July 15, 1799, as shovels struck against the earth, a large black stone began to emerge. At first, it looked like nothing more than a broken slab, perhaps part of an old wall or a fragment of a monument. Its top was missing, broken off, and its edges rough. Yet as the dirt fell away and the smooth surface became clear, the soldiers noticed something unusual. Rows of carefully carved writing covered the stone. Not just one kind of writing, but three. The soldiers may not have been scholars, but they knew enough to sense importance. They could recognize Greek letters, and though the other scripts were unfamiliar, the presence of three distinct texts suggested purpose. They lifted the stone carefully, its weight pressing heavily against their arms. At more than 1,000 pounds, it was not a light find, but its significance was heavier still. Word of the discovery spread quickly. Officers reported it, and soon the scholars traveling with Napoleon's expedition gathered around the stone. They examined its inscriptions with wonder. The Greek text at the bottom was clear enough for them to read. It spoke of a decree, honoring the reign of a young pharaoh named Ptolemy V, who had ruled more than 2,000 years earlier. But what captured their attention most was not the decree itself, but the fact that the same message appeared in two other scripts, one called demotic, a more common Egyptian script of the time, and the other the mysterious hieroglyphs. It was as if history had left behind a riddle and its solution, side by side. The Greek text, still understood, could serve as a guide to the other two, especially to the hieroglyphs that had been unreadable for centuries. For the first time in over 1,000 years, there was a possibility of unlocking the language of the pharaohs. The scholars felt a quiet thrill. They copied the inscriptions carefully, tracing the shapes onto paper so they could be studied later. The Rosetta Stone, as it came to be called, became more than just a fragment of rock, it became a key, a door into the silence of Egypt. Imagine that moment. The desert air heavy with heat, the soldiers sweating from their labor, their hands covered in dust. And then, from the soil, a voice of the past emerges. It does not shout. It does not demand attention. It simply waits, inscribed in three scripts, offering itself to those who are patient enough to listen. The Rosetta Stone was carried from the small fort to Cairo, where scholars of Napoleon's expedition continued to study it. They realized at once its importance. For centuries, the hieroglyphs had resisted every attempt at translation. But now, here was the same decree written in a language still alive, Greek. It was as if two worlds had met on one stone, and together they could illuminate the third. But history is rarely simple. The discovery of the stone took place amid war, and the French occupation of Egypt was short-lived. In 1801, the British defeated the French, and Egypt slipped from Napoleon's grasp. In the treaty that followed, many of the antiquities collected by the French, including the Rosetta Stone, were handed over to Britain. In 1802, the stone was shipped to London, where it would eventually be placed in the British Museum. Still, in that first moment of discovery, before politics and ownership clouded the story, there was a simple wonder: a stone buried in the earth had resurfaced, carrying with it the voices of ancient Egypt. The soldiers who lifted it could not have imagined the significance of what they held. To them, it was just another stone at first, perhaps unusual, perhaps worth notice. But in truth, it was a bridge between worlds, one that would change the study of history forever. Think of the patience of time. The decree on the Rosetta Stone had been carved in 196 BC, meant to honor a young king and ensure loyalty among his people. It was not written for us, not written for scholars or dreamers centuries later. And yet, by chance, it survived when so many other inscriptions were lost. It survived the fall of dynasties, the rise of empires, the shifting of sand and stone. Buried, broken, forgotten, and then revealed at just the right moment, when the world was ready to hear it again. As you drift in thought, imagine the hands that carved it. Chisels striking stone, symbols carefully inscribed. The decree was official, formal, a message of power. But hidden within its repeated scripts was something greater than the decree itself: the survival of language, the preservation of memory. That preservation, silent for centuries, would now awaken. So the Rosetta Stone's journey began, not as a treasure displayed in glass, not as a symbol of museums and debates, but as a quiet discovery by soldiers in the heat of an Egyptian summer. A broken stone, lifted from the earth, its inscriptions waiting patiently. In that moment, Egypt's silence trembled. The possibility of rediscovering its lost voice had arrived. And with that, history leaned closer, whispering once again through stone. The Rosetta Stone, once lifted from the dusty soil of Rosetta, did not immediately reveal its secrets. At first, it was simply an object of curiosity, dark and heavy, its broken surface filled with lines of careful carvings. The soldiers who found it had sensed it was unusual, but for the scholars who gathered around it in Cairo, the stone seemed to shimmer with possibility. It was as though an old, locked door had appeared, its key hidden in plain sight. The scholars bent over the stone with quiet concentration. They touched the carved letters with their fingers, tracing lines across the surface. Their eyes followed the scripts, the familiar letters of Greek along the bottom, the flowing curves of the demotic script in the middle, and above them, the strange, almost pictorial figures of hieroglyphs. 3 scripts, side by side, repeating the same decree. The Greek inscription was read first. Greek had long been studied in Europe, and though the stone's text was worn, the scholars could still decipher it. It spoke of a decree issued in 196 BC, during the reign of Pharaoh Ptolemy V. The decree honored the king, praising his generosity and his victories, and reaffirming the loyalty of the priests to his throne. To the scholars, this was interesting, but not extraordinary. Such decrees were common in the ancient world. What was extraordinary, however, was the repetition. The decree was written 3 times, in 3 languages. This was unusual, but not accidental. At that time in Egypt, Greek was the language of government, used by rulers and officials. Demotic was the everyday script, used for practical records and communication among Egyptians. And hieroglyphs, sacred and ancient, were reserved for the language of the gods and the temples. To carve all 3 on one stone was to ensure that the decree could be read by priests, by scribes, and by rulers alike. The scholars quickly realized that this trilingual inscription could be something far greater than a simple decree. If the same text was repeated, and if one version could be read, then perhaps, just perhaps, the others could be understood too. The hieroglyphs, unreadable for centuries, might finally yield their meaning. The stone, then, was not only an inscription. It was a key. But at first, this realization was more dream than certainty. The scholars gazed at the hieroglyphs, with their birds and serpents, suns and feathers, and they could not help but feel overwhelmed. For so long, people had argued about what these symbols meant. Were they words? Were they pictures? Did they represent ideas, sounds, or mysteries too deep for ordinary minds? Some believed hieroglyphs were purely symbolic, images that conveyed meaning without sound. Others thought they were a code, representing hidden truths of magic and philosophy. The truth lay somewhere between, but in these early days, confusion still clouded the path. As the scholars studied the stone, their excitement mixed with frustration. The Greek text gave them a foundation, but the hieroglyphs resisted easy interpretation. Even the demotic script, more practical and flowing, was unfamiliar. Still, there was hope. For the first time, there was something solid to work with, a direct connection between the known and the unknown. The Rosetta Stone soon became an object of fascination not only for the scholars in Egypt but also for those back in Europe. Copies of its inscriptions were made, carefully traced and shipped abroad, so that linguists and thinkers far from Cairo could examine the puzzle. When these copies reached Paris and London, they caused a quiet ripple of wonder among the learned circles of Europe. Here was something new, something tantalizing, a mystery that seemed within reach. Imagine being one of those scholars, receiving a copy of the stone's inscriptions. The paper arrives, unfolded carefully, revealing 3 bands of writing. You recognize the Greek, and you read the decree. But then your eyes climb upward, into the flowing curves of demotic, and further still, into the hieroglyphs. The shapes are delicate, precise, each carved with intention. And yet, to you, they are silent. You feel both the thrill of possibility and the weight of the unknown. This was the mood of the early years of the Rosetta Stone's discovery. A mix of hope and confusion, of wonder and patience. The stone promised answers, but it also demanded time. Like a quiet teacher, it would not reveal its lesson quickly. It would require study, comparison, and persistence. It would require more than one mind, more than one generation, to finally open the door. The soldiers who had first unearthed it could not have imagined the waves of curiosity it would create. To them, it was heavy, a burden to lift. To the scholars, it was heavy too, but in another way, heavy with meaning, heavy with promise. In those early days, the Rosetta Stone also inspired something else: imagination. Writers described it as a treasure of knowledge, a relic that could restore the voice of a lost civilization. Artists sketched it, capturing its broken top and crowded inscriptions. Ordinary people, hearing of its discovery, wondered at its power. The stone became not only a scholarly object but also a symbol of mystery itself, a reminder that the past still held secrets waiting to be revealed. And yet, despite all this excitement, the path forward was uncertain. Some scholars believed the task was impossible, that hieroglyphs were too far removed from living languages to ever be understood. Others believed it would take decades, even centuries, to unravel. Still, the stone had stirred something that could not be undone. The silence of Egypt had been touched, and though its voice was still faint, it had begun to stir. As you drift deeper into this story, picture the scholars leaning over the stone, candles flickering beside them, their pens scratching against paper as they copied the inscriptions. The air is still, heavy with concentration. Their eyes move from line to line, their brows furrowed, their hearts quietly hopeful. They do not yet know the answers. But they know the journey has begun. The Rosetta Stone's first impressions were not about clarity but about possibility. It was a reminder that mysteries can be solved, that silence can be broken, that patience can awaken voices thought lost forever. It was, in every sense, the beginning of something greater. And so, the stone sat quietly, a fragment of history placed in the hands of the present. Its inscriptions waited. Its secrets remained just out of reach. But for the first time in centuries, the silence of Egypt was no longer absolute. A whisper had begun. A path had opened. The journey to understanding had truly started. The Rosetta Stone is often described as a key, but every key must fit a lock. The lock, in this case, was the writing system of ancient Egypt, a system that had remained closed and silent for centuries. To understand the miracle of the stone, we must pause for a moment and look closely at the 3 scripts carved upon its surface. Each script was more than just letters on stone. Each represented a different voice of Egypt, and together, they held the bridge between the ancient world and the modern one. At the very top of the Rosetta Stone are the hieroglyphs. These were the sacred signs of ancient Egypt, the ones most travelers recognized on the walls of temples and tombs. They are perhaps the most striking and beautiful of all ancient scripts, tiny pictures of animals, plants, tools, and shapes, each carved with precision. A falcon, a lotus, an eye, a scarab beetle, a reed. To the untrained eye, they seem like art, almost like decorations. But to the Egyptians, they were language. Complex, structured, and filled with meaning. Hieroglyphs were not used for everyday notes or letters. They were reserved for the sacred and the monumental. The word hieroglyph itself comes from Greek, meaning sacred carvings. These inscriptions were meant to endure for eternity. They were carved into temple walls, etched into statues, and painted onto tombs. Hieroglyphs were thought to carry power. To write something in hieroglyphs was not simply to record, it was to make the words themselves alive. But hieroglyphs were also difficult to learn. They were complex, with hundreds of different signs. Some represented sounds, like letters. Some represented whole words or ideas. Others acted as markers, clarifying meaning. To master hieroglyphs required years of study, and only trained scribes and priests could truly command them. Over time, as new rulers and new languages entered Egypt, fewer and fewer people studied the old sacred script. Eventually, the knowledge was lost, and the signs became silent art, their voices forgotten. Beneath the hieroglyphs on the Rosetta Stone lies the second script, demotic. If hieroglyphs were the lofty, sacred voice of Egypt, demotic was its practical tongue. Demotic script developed around the 7th century BC, and it was the script of the people. It was used for contracts, letters, business records, and everyday affairs. While hieroglyphs adorned temples, demotic filled the pages of papyrus scrolls, keeping track of trade, taxes, and laws. The word demotic itself comes from the Greek word demotikos, meaning, of the people. It was faster to write than hieroglyphs, with flowing curves and simplified signs. To those unfamiliar with it, demotic looks almost like a series of tangled lines, elegant but compressed, quick and efficient. To an Egyptian scribe of the Ptolemaic era, it was the language of daily life. And then, beneath demotic, comes the third script, Greek. This was the language of power in Ptolemaic Egypt, the language of the rulers. After Alexander the Great conquered Egypt in 332 BC, Greek became the official tongue of administration. The dynasty of the Ptolemies, Macedonian rulers who followed in Alexander's footsteps, spoke Greek, issued decrees in Greek, and ruled their multicultural kingdom through it. By the time the Rosetta Stone was carved in 196 BC, Egypt was a land of many voices. The priests of the temples still clung to hieroglyphs, guarding their ancient traditions. The scribes and merchants relied on demotic for the flow of everyday life. The rulers and officials used Greek to govern. To issue a decree that all could understand, it had to be carved in all three scripts. And so, the Rosetta Stone became a trilingual message, bridging priests, scribes, and kings. When the stone was first studied, this layering of scripts fascinated the scholars. They realized they were not looking at three separate messages, but one. Repeated, mirrored, echoed in three tongues. The decree praised Ptolemy V, declaring his generosity and his devotion to the temples, and confirming that statues of him would be placed in sanctuaries across Egypt. In essence, it was a political message, a reinforcement of loyalty. But its true gift to history lay in its form. Without intending to, the priests who ordered the carving had left behind the key to unlocking an entire language. Think of it this way, the Rosetta Stone is like a bridge across a river. On one side stands the modern world, fluent in Greek. On the other side lies the ancient world, with its unreadable hieroglyphs. And across the middle, like stepping stones, runs demotic, connecting the two. By walking across carefully, matching word for word, symbol for symbol, scholars could move from what was known to what had been lost. At first, this was overwhelming. The hieroglyphs had been silent for centuries, and now, suddenly, there was a way forward. The demotic script too, though unfamiliar, began to yield to careful study, since it was simpler and closer to other known writing systems. Slowly, painstakingly, scholars began to compare the scripts, searching for patterns, aligning the lines. For those early readers, each script carried a different kind of wonder. The hieroglyphs felt majestic, almost mystical, their pictorial signs hinting at hidden worlds. Demotic felt practical, swift, the scribble of a busy hand at work. And Greek felt comforting, a familiar voice, steady and clear, guiding them as they stepped into the unknown. Imagine, for a moment, tracing the lines of the stone yourself. Your finger moves across the Greek letters, reading words you understand. Then you move upward, following the flowing demotic, the letters beginning to reveal their structure. And finally, your hand rests on the hieroglyphs, the falcon, the eye, the lotus. They are silent, but no longer unreachable. You feel the quiet thrill of standing at the edge of discovery. This is what the Rosetta Stone offered, a chance to listen again. A chance to break the silence of Egypt. A chance to restore a voice thought lost forever. The priests who carved it never intended this. To them, it was a decree, a political message to honor their king. But history often works in ways unnoticed by those who live it. What they saw as duty became, in time, a gift. A fragment of stone, broken and buried, would one day unlock the language of their ancestors. And so, the Rosetta Stone became not just an object of study, but a symbol. A symbol of how languages connect, how memory endures, and how even the most ordinary of decrees can carry extraordinary meaning. As you rest now, let these three scripts drift gently through your mind: the sacred beauty of hieroglyphs, the flowing hand of demotic, the steady clarity of Greek. Together, they form a harmony of voices, three strands woven into one. And in their union, the silence of Egypt began to fade. As the sun glimmered over the Egyptian horizon, the Rosetta Stone was no longer just a fragment of dark basalt, forgotten in the sands. It had been lifted carefully from the ruins of Fort Julian near Rosetta, wrapped, carried, and transported under careful watch. Its journey was not only physical, from village to town, but symbolic as well. An object once hidden in silence was slowly entering the world of human curiosity. The soldiers who had found it did not entirely grasp its weight, not only in kilograms, but in meaning. For them, it was simply a heavy slab covered in mysterious carvings. Yet, when officers of Napoleon's expedition took notice, they understood that this was more than stone. It was a text. A message. A puzzle waiting to be heard. And so began its slow journey towards Alexandria, the city where scholars had gathered under French command to study the wonders of Egypt. The road to Alexandria was long and hot, the air heavy with dust and the rhythm of camels' steps. Soldiers carried the stone on a makeshift cart, its surface covered with cloth to protect the fragile inscriptions. In the evenings, when the desert cooled, curious hands would pull back the cover to glance at its strange lines. Some would whisper, "What does it say?" But no one could answer. The characters were unlike anything most men had ever seen. When the Rosetta Stone finally reached Alexandria, it was presented to a group of scholars, the savants, as they were called, members of Napoleon's Commission des Sciences et des Arts. These men were not soldiers. They were astronomers, engineers, geographers, linguists, and artists. They had come to Egypt not only to follow Napoleon's armies, but to study and record the secrets of the land. They had measured pyramids, drawn temples, and mapped the Nile. And now, before them, stood this dark slab with three distinct bands of writing. The scholars leaned over the stone with oil lamps flickering in the background, casting golden shadows over the polished basalt. They touched the carved grooves lightly, tracing the mysterious signs with fingertips. At the top, rows of carefully carved hieroglyphs. Below them, faster, simpler symbols of another script, one they called demotic. And at the very bottom, familiar Greek letters. It was this bottom line that drew their attention most, for at last there was something they could read. The Greek text told them this was a decree, issued in honor of King Ptolemy V in the 2nd century before Christ. It explained that the priests of Egypt had gathered to honor their ruler, praising his generosity and devotion. But more importantly, the Greek text revealed something crucial, that the same decree had been written 3 times, once in Greek, once in demotic, and once in hieroglyphs. The scholars whispered to each other in excitement. Could this be the key? Could this stone unlock the silence of ancient Egypt's lost language? If the Greek said one thing, and the hieroglyphs mirrored it, then perhaps line by line, word by word, a connection could be made. And so, careful copies were made. Artists sketched the inscriptions. Ink rubbings were pressed onto sheets of paper. Each mark, each curve, each symbol was captured with precision. These copies were vital, for the scholars knew that war could take the stone away, but the knowledge preserved on paper could endure. In Alexandria, debates filled the warm night air. Some scholars believed hieroglyphs were only symbols, representing ideas or sacred concepts. Others argued they must be an alphabet, like Greek or Latin, though perhaps more complex. Around lantern-lit tables, they argued softly, voices hushed as though not to disturb the stone itself. Meanwhile, the Rosetta Stone rested quietly in its chamber, like a patient teacher waiting for its students to grow wise enough to listen. The journey to Alexandria was not only the journey of a stone but also the beginning of a shift in human understanding. For centuries, hieroglyphs had stood silently on temple walls, pyramids, and obelisks, their meanings lost after the last priests of Egypt had vanished. Travelers had stared at them in awe but could not read them. Generations had wondered, what secrets do they hold? Now, for the first time, there was hope that the silence might be broken. Word of the stone spread through the French camp and beyond. Officers, scholars, and even ordinary soldiers came to see it. Some spoke of it with reverence, others with indifference. Yet all felt a sense of mystery in its presence. It was as though the stone held within it a bridge to another world, a voice frozen in time, waiting to be awakened. As the days passed in Alexandria, the Rosetta Stone became a focal point. Scholars returned again and again, studying their rubbings, comparing their notes, trying to align the Greek with the unfamiliar scripts above it. Though progress was slow, the very act of comparison brought a spark of hope. The stone's journey had begun with chance, but now it stood in the path of intention. It was no longer a buried fragment. It was a symbol of possibility. And so, Alexandria became the stage for the first chapter of decipherment. Not a quick revelation, but a careful unfolding. Night after night, under the quiet hum of the city, scholars traced symbols, wrote observations, and dreamed of the day when Egypt would speak again. The Rosetta Stone had traveled from a forgotten wall in Rosetta to the hands of scholars who sensed its promise. Its voice was still silent, but in the hearts of those who gazed upon it, a gentle echo stirred. An invitation to listen more closely, to study more patiently, to wait with reverence. The Rosetta Stone, once resting quietly in the sands of Egypt, soon became more than an object of discovery. It became a symbol. A prize. A treasure that powerful nations would claim as their own. Tonight, let us drift softly into the story of how the stone began its journey, carried from the banks of the Nile to the heart of Europe. A journey marked not only by curiosity and scholarship, but also by rivalry, ambition, and the echoes of empire. When the French scholars first examined the stone in 1799, they quickly realized its importance. They understood, perhaps more than anyone else, that this was not just a piece of black basalt with writing on it. It was a bridge between worlds. The French expedition had hoped to gather knowledge, to collect antiquities, to bring back to Paris the memory of ancient Egypt. Napoleon himself had dreamed of being remembered not just as a general, but as a bringer of civilization. The Rosetta Stone, in its quiet way, seemed to fulfill part of that vision. But history, as it so often does, had other plans. The tides of war soon turned against France. In 1801, the British defeated the French forces in Egypt. The once proud expedition, filled with scholars and soldiers, found themselves surrendering not only land but also their treasures. Among those treasures was the Rosetta Stone. Imagine, for a moment, the scene of surrender. French officers, weary from years of campaign, reluctant to part with the artifacts they had so carefully studied. British officers, eager to claim these spoils as trophies of victory. The Rosetta Stone, silent as ever, bore witness to this transfer. It was lifted, carefully but firmly, from French hands into British possession. Its fate sealed not by scholars or priests, but by the fortunes of war. The British understood its value. Not only as an artifact of great historical significance but also as a symbol of triumph over their European rival. They arranged for the stone to be shipped to England, where it would take on a new chapter in its life. The voyage itself must have been a curious one. Packed alongside other antiquities, guarded against the hazards of sea travel, the Rosetta Stone left the land of the pharaohs. Its inscriptions, Greek, demotic, and hieroglyphic, sailing across the waters, destined for a new audience far away. When the stone arrived in London in 1802, it was greeted with great excitement. Scholars, linguists, and the curious public alike were drawn to it. The British Museum, newly founded in the mid-18th century, became its home. There, in the grand halls, the Rosetta Stone was placed on display. It quickly became one of the most admired objects in the entire collection. Visitors marveled at its inscriptions, and scholars lined up to copy them. Yet the transfer of the Rosetta Stone was not without controversy. Even in those days, questions were asked. Should this stone, found in the land of Egypt, not remain there? Was it right for the British to claim it as their own, simply because they had defeated the French? The stone, after all, belonged to a world far older than either of these nations. Its true home was Egypt, where the pharaohs had once ruled and the Nile had once carried the whispers of scribes. But empires rarely asked such questions. To the victors went the spoils, and the Rosetta Stone became one of the most famous prizes of that age. Softly, we might imagine how Egyptians themselves felt, as news spread that this stone of great importance was leaving their land. For them, it was not merely a relic. It was a piece of their identity. It was a key to their ancestors' voices, a connection to temples, rituals, and histories long buried. Yet it slipped away, carried into the collections of a distant empire. The British Museum, however, gave the stone new visibility. Thousands, perhaps millions over the years, came to see it. Students of language stood in awe before it. Children gazed up at its inscriptions, wondering what ancient secrets it might reveal. In its silence, the stone spoke to all who saw it. It whispered of kings, of decrees, of priests and pharaohs, but also of the strange journey it had taken, rescued from ruins, carried by soldiers, claimed by empires, and placed under glass. The contest between France and Britain over the stone mirrored their larger rivalry across the world. Both nations dreamed of empire. Both sought to control the past as well as the present. To own the Rosetta Stone was to own, in some way, the key to ancient Egypt itself. France had discovered it. Britain had claimed it. And Egypt, the birthplace of the stone, had lost it, for a time. In the gentle flow of history, the Rosetta Stone's journey reminds us of the power of objects. They are not alive, and yet they carry meaning. They become symbols of pride, or conquest, or identity. For the British, the stone became a treasure of scholarship. For the French, it was a bitter loss. For the Egyptians, it was a wound, a reminder of what had been taken. And for the world of learning, it was a beacon, a puzzle that promised great rewards. Even now, when we look upon it, we sense both wonder and sadness. The wonder of what it unlocked. The sadness of its long displacement. But history is often like that, a mixture of light and shadow, of discovery and loss. The Rosetta Stone's voyage from Egypt to Europe is a tale of such contrasts, filled with triumphs and questions that echo softly even today. And so, the stone remained in London, far from the sands that once embraced it. Yet its inscriptions began to travel further, seeping into the minds of scholars who would dedicate their lives to unraveling the mysteries within. The next chapter of its story was not about empires, but about patience, brilliance, and the slow unlocking of a language that had been silent for centuries. The Rosetta Stone, resting quietly in the hands of scholars, was at first nothing more than a puzzle of repeated signs and patterns. It promised much, but in its early days, the stone seemed to withhold its secrets with a certain stubbornness. Imagine, if you will, a circle of scholars seated around the stone's careful inscriptions. Their voices low, their fingers tracing the edges of signs they did not yet understand. Some spoke of the beauty of the characters. Some believed they were nothing more than decorative images, symbols with no true system. Others suspected, deep down, that the hieroglyphs carried words, meanings, names, and histories yet to be revealed. In those first years, the task of deciphering the stone was an adventure of guesses. The Greek portion could be read easily, of course. Scholars understood that language well. It was the hieroglyphs and the middle script, demotic, that seemed so distant. Some men believed the hieroglyphs were purely symbolic, pictures meant to represent abstract ideas rather than sounds. A bird, they said, might mean flight, or spirit, but never the sound of a letter. Others disagreed, insisting the signs must hold a phonetic value. This was the heart of the challenge. No one could agree on the very nature of hieroglyphs. Were they words? Were they letters? Were they pictures only of things? Or perhaps all three at once? In those early days, one man after another offered theories. Some believed they were close to solving the code, yet their paths often ended in frustration. For centuries, hieroglyphs had been a silent language, lost to the ages. It was as though Egypt itself had chosen to keep her secrets buried, hidden away like treasures beneath the desert sand. Let us picture, for a moment, a scholar seated late at night, a candle flickering beside him. The Rosetta text lies before him, carefully copied onto paper. He leans close, studying the neat rows of symbols. His hand rests on his cheek as he wonders, could the small l be a sound? Could the reed leaf mark the beginning of a word? His thoughts drift. His eyes blur with the strange beauty of the script. The candle's flame wavers. And still, the meaning resists. Some early thinkers made bold claims. A Swedish scholar suggested that hieroglyphs were not only words but mystical symbols of cosmic truth. He thought that to read them was to read the language of the universe. Others, more cautious, believed the signs were a priestly code, never meant for common understanding. Such theories, while poetic, did little to unlock the true key. It was not until the 19th century truly began to unfold that the first glimmers of progress appeared. Scholars realized that the stone contained a royal decree, repeated in 3 scripts. If the Greek gave the names of rulers, perhaps the hieroglyphs did the same. Names could be the anchor, the starting point, the doorway through which to step. And so attention turned to what would become famous, the royal cartouches. These were oval shapes, enclosing groups of hieroglyphs, believed to hold the names of kings. It was a small clue, but one that would grow into something immense. If the cartouches truly named rulers, then each symbol inside must carry sound, not just ideas. They must be letters, or at least syllables. This thought became the quiet seed of hope, planted in the minds of those who studied the stone. Yet progress was painfully slow. For every step forward, 2 steps seemed to lead backward. A mistaken interpretation could undo months of work. Some scholars clung to the idea of symbols representing only sacred concepts, while others became lost in endless speculation. The stone was patient. It did not yield. And so the work continued, quietly, painstakingly. Scholars in Paris, in London, in small study rooms across Europe, pored over copies of the inscriptions. They compared signs, counted their repetitions, and matched them carefully to Greek words. The process was both tedious and enchanting. For those who studied, it was like listening for whispers in a silent chamber, straining for a voice from across 3,000 years. As we imagine these early attempts, let us rest with the thought of persistence. Though progress seemed distant, the efforts were not wasted. Each attempt, however flawed, brought the world closer to understanding. Each guess, each failure, was a step along the winding path. The Rosetta Stone itself seemed almost alive in this process. It sat silently, as if testing the patience of those who sought to understand it. Like the desert winds that slowly shaped the dunes, the stone shaped the minds of those who approached it. It required humility, quiet, and time. Eventually, glimmers of light appeared. Some scholars noticed that certain groups of signs repeated in ways that matched the Greek names. A falcon here, a sun disk there. Could it be? Slowly, patterns emerged. The idea that hieroglyphs could hold sound grew stronger. The stone was beginning to whisper, softly, faintly, like a voice behind a curtain. But the full revelation had not yet come. These early efforts were foundations, the first cautious footsteps on a much longer journey. Soon, others would pick up the trail, men like Thomas Young, who would edge closer still to the secret. But in these early years, the story was one of quiet trial and error, of nighttime study and daytime debate. And so, the Rosetta Stone continued to sit in silence, its voice waiting for the right listener, its message still hidden in plain sight. The early attempts at deciphering, though incomplete, were the necessary beginnings. Like a lullaby whose final verse has not yet been sung, they set the rhythm, they shaped the tone, they invited the world to listen more carefully. As the night deepens around our imagination, we may feel the same gentle patience. The story is still unfolding. The mystery is still alive. The early attempts at deciphering the Rosetta Stone had been slow, filled with guesses, errors, and theories that flickered like candlelight. Yet in the quiet corners of London, a man with patience, curiosity, and a gentle mind began to piece together the first real clues. His name was Thomas Young, a polymath whose calm intelligence would soon leave a lasting mark on the story of the stone. Young was not a linguist by training alone. He was a physician, a physicist, a mathematician, a thinker whose mind roamed across disciplines. Yet he had a deep fascination with languages, and when he first saw copies of the Rosetta Stone, something stirred within him. He approached the inscriptions not as a task of conquest, but as a puzzle, delicate and intricate, deserving careful observation. Imagine him seated at a small wooden desk, a soft lamp casting a warm glow over sheets of paper filled with painstaking copies of the stone's inscriptions. His hand traced the rows of hieroglyphs, moving slowly, thoughtfully, as if feeling for the rhythm of each symbol. Each curve, each bird, each snake, seemed to carry a secret. And Thomas Young listened, quietly, letting the stone guide him. One of Young's first insights was simple, yet profound. He noticed that the hieroglyphs within oval shapes, called cartouches, always appeared in the same way in certain parts of the inscriptions. Through comparison with the Greek text, he deduced that these cartouches contained the names of kings. A small revelation, but one that would unlock many doors. He began to match the hieroglyphs in the cartouches with the corresponding Greek letters, slowly understanding that these symbols represented sounds, not merely ideas. This was a gentle, incremental discovery. Young realized that the hieroglyphs could be phonetic. They could convey the sounds of words, letters of names. He tested this carefully, comparing symbols, counting repetitions, and observing the context of the inscriptions. For the first time, there was a glimpse of structure, a rhythm, a pattern emerging from the once impenetrable wall of characters. Yet Young's progress was meticulous and slow. He did not rush. He did not make bold, sweeping claims. Instead, he noted small correspondences, small consistencies, and recorded them with precision. His quiet mind worked patiently, building a foundation for others to follow. The stone responded to his patience. It yielded small hints, gentle nudges, as if acknowledging a mind willing to listen. Young also studied the demotic script, the flowing, practical writing that lay between the hieroglyphs and the Greek. Here, too, he found patterns, repetitions that mirrored the Greek text. He began to understand that demotic, while simpler than hieroglyphs, followed some of the same phonetic principles. It became a bridge between the ancient sacred language and the more practical, everyday writing of the Egyptian people. This careful work laid the groundwork for future breakthroughs. Young published his findings in quiet, measured notes, sharing them with other scholars. Though not all understood the full significance at first, the seeds of understanding were planted. Scholars now knew that hieroglyphs could represent sounds, that cartouches contained royal names, and that careful comparison with Greek could yield real results. Imagine the calm determination it took to study the Rosetta Stone in such detail. Each evening, Thomas Young would sit with copies of the inscriptions spread across his desk. The lamp flickered gently, casting long shadows. Outside, the streets of London were quiet, the world moving on. Inside, he moved slowly, observing patterns, testing ideas, sketching signs. It was a quiet labor, but profound. Young's discoveries were subtle, almost whispering. He had not fully deciphered hieroglyphs, but he had opened the door. The mystery was no longer entirely sealed. Scholars could now see a path forward. They could trace sounds, align symbols with Greek words, and imagine how a complex language, silent for centuries, could be read once more. Patience was the key. Young understood that the Rosetta Stone would not yield its secrets all at once. It required time, attention, and respect. Each symbol was a voice from the past, quiet yet insistent, waiting for someone willing to listen. And Young listened. He did not claim glory. He did not rush to conclusions. He simply observed, recorded, and thought. In those years, the stone became a companion of study and reflection. Scholars would return to it, night after night, candlelight flickering across its surface. They compared hieroglyphs to Greek letters, traced cartouches, and noted repetitions. Some became discouraged, but Thomas Young remained steady. His calm approach reminded others that discovery is rarely sudden. It is a patient unfolding, like the slow rising of the sun over the Nile, gentle and inevitable. Young's quiet breakthroughs also inspired others. They demonstrated that the mystery of the Rosetta Stone was not beyond human reach. With careful attention, persistence, and a willingness to see patterns where others saw only confusion, the stone's language could be approached. The work of decipherment, which had seemed impossible to so many, now had a starting point. Even today, when we consider Thomas Young's role, it is remarkable how much could be achieved with patience, observation, and careful thought. The stone, silent for centuries, began to speak not in shouts or proclamations, but in quiet hints. Young heard those whispers and followed them, step by step, opening the way for the full decipherment that would come later through the genius of Jean-François Champollion. The story of the Rosetta Stone might have ended in quiet frustration, if not for one remarkable mind. A man who listened patiently to the whispers of history, who traced the delicate lines of symbols with care, and who carried in his heart a lifelong fascination with the languages of Egypt. His name was Jean-François Champollion, and he would become the first person to truly unlock the ancient voice of hieroglyphs. Champollion was born in France in 1790, just a few years before the discovery of the Rosetta Stone. From an early age, he displayed an unusual gift for languages. By the time he was a child, he had already begun learning Latin and Greek. Later, he studied Coptic, the language of Christian Egyptians, descended directly from the ancient tongue. This knowledge would prove crucial. For centuries, scholars had searched for a connection between the silent hieroglyphs and a living language. Champollion carried that bridge within him. Imagine a young scholar sitting in his study, sunlight filtering softly through a window, the smell of old books filling the air. Sheets of paper covered with Greek letters, demotic signs, and hieroglyphs are spread before him. Each night, he leans over the texts, tracing symbols, comparing sounds, listening for patterns. He is quiet, concentrated, his mind moving gently across centuries. Champollion's first breakthrough came from careful comparison. He noticed that the cartouches, those oval shapes surrounding royal names, matched certain names in the Greek inscriptions. By matching the symbols to the sounds of names like Ptolemy and Cleopatra, he could begin to assign phonetic values to the hieroglyphs. Slowly, carefully, he began to hear the sounds behind the silent signs. This was a moment of quiet wonder, though not one of immediate triumph. Each discovery led to more questions, each pattern revealed deeper complexity. Hieroglyphs, Champollion realized, were not purely phonetic like Greek. They were a mixture, some symbols conveyed sounds, others ideas, others determinatives that clarified meaning. It was a sophisticated system, intricate and subtle, but also elegant and logical. By 1822, after years of careful study, Champollion made the declaration that would change the world of Egyptology forever. He announced that he had deciphered the hieroglyphs. They were no longer a mystery, no longer silent. The ancient language of the pharaohs, lost for centuries, could once again be read. Scholars could now approach temple walls, obelisks, and tombs and understand their messages. The voice of Egypt, silent for so long, had returned. Champollion's work was meticulous and precise. He began with royal names, then expanded to titles, phrases, and common words. Using his knowledge of Coptic, he he could interpret the grammar and syntax of the inscriptions. Demotic, too, became clearer in his hands, revealing its connection as a simplified, everyday form of the sacred writing. Each discovery was a piece of a puzzle, fitting together in a quiet but extraordinary symphony. The Rosetta Stone itself, in London, remained a central object of study. Scholars continued to copy it, compare it, and verify Champollion's findings. Though the stone was physically distant from France, its inscriptions traveled through papers, drawings, and reports, allowing Champollion and others to work without touching it directly. The stone's journey across the seas had not diminished its significance; if anything, it had amplified it. It was now a key, not only in Europe but for the entire world. Imagine the quiet satisfaction of Champollion as he realized the full meaning of the text. The decree praising Ptolemy V was no longer just a series of strange symbols. It was a voice from the past, speaking across millennia. Priests, scribes, and kings were no longer silent figures. Their words could be read, understood, and appreciated. History had begun to speak again. Champollion's discovery opened the door to countless other studies. Monuments long ignored, tombs untouched by modern knowledge, temples hidden under desert sands, all could now be read. Hieroglyphs were no longer an impenetrable mystery. They became a bridge to the past, allowing scholars to explore the beliefs, rituals, and daily lives of the people of ancient Egypt. The impact of this achievement was profound. Not only did it enrich historical knowledge, but it also restored a sense of continuity to human culture. A language once lost had been found. A civilization, distant in time, could now communicate with the present. And it all began, quietly, with the patient study of a single stone, discovered on a dusty battlefield, carried across deserts and seas, and studied with care by minds willing to listen. Champollion's success reminds us that understanding often comes slowly, patiently, and with great attention to detail. It is not the loud or immediate triumphs that endure, but the careful, deliberate work of those willing to follow the threads of knowledge wherever they may lead. And so, Jean-François Champollion became the final key. Through his quiet brilliance, patience, and understanding of language, the ancient voices of Egypt could finally be heard. The Rosetta Stone had fulfilled its destiny, bridging centuries of silence and opening a world of history, culture, and wonder for all who wished to listen. With the Rosetta Stone deciphered, the world began to hear the quiet voices of ancient Egypt. Jean-François Champollion had opened the door, but what lay beyond that door was far richer than anyone could have imagined. The inscriptions on the stone, once a mystery, revealed not only the names of kings but the rhythms of religion, governance, and culture, echoes of temples and priests that had been silent for centuries. Imagine, softly, a temple rising in the desert. Its walls, once painted in brilliant colors, are now faded. The sun casts gentle patterns through its tall columns, and the air carries the whispers of rituals long ended. For thousands of years, these walls have been silent. Hieroglyphs trace every surface, gods, offerings, sacred animals, and prayers for eternity. To the casual eye, they are beautiful pictures. To the trained eye, they are a record, a map of thought, law, and devotion. Before the Rosetta Stone, most of these inscriptions were closed to human understanding. Scholars could guess at meaning, interpret art, and admire craftsmanship, but they could not read the words themselves. Now, with the key provided by the stone, every cartouche, every row of hieroglyphs, began to reveal its story. Kings and queens could be identified. Deities could be named. The complex relationship between ruler, priest, and people became clear. The stone itself was a decree, a royal message meant for temples, not just for scholars. Ptolemy V, the young king praised in the inscriptions, had ordered gifts and offerings to temples across Egypt. Priests were instructed to honor him, to proclaim his generosity, and to place statues in his image. The text was at once political, religious, and ceremonial, a reflection of the intertwined nature of authority and faith in ancient Egypt. But the implications were greater than a single decree. With hieroglyphs now readable, the walls of temples like Karnak, Luxor, and Abu Simbel began to speak. The complex hieroglyphic inscriptions described offerings to gods such as Ammonius, Osiris, and Isis. They recounted festivals, ritual prayers, and instructions for the afterlife. Each stone tablet, each column, became a story, revealing the mind and spirit of a civilization long past. Consider the scene in Champollion's study, or in the quiet corners of the British Museum. Scholars traced the signs from the Rosetta Stone and then applied the same principles to temple inscriptions. Slowly, carefully, the ancient texts were translated. It was like opening a series of locked doors, each one revealing new wonders. The Rosetta Stone was the first key, but many more doors awaited, and the patient work of observation turned mystery into knowledge. The temples themselves were extraordinary records of daily life, belief, and governance. Inscriptions revealed how priests oversaw agricultural offerings, how the king ensured balance and order, and how the people participated in sacred festivals. Gods were portrayed not only as powerful deities but also as beings with personalities, narratives, and interactions with humans. Through the Rosetta Stone's key, scholars could finally understand the structure of these complex narratives. Even the smallest details mattered. Symbols representing grains, livestock, or ritual objects became clear. The demotic script, once mysterious, offered insight into the administrative work of temples. Names of towns, taxes, and trade arrangements were recorded, giving scholars a glimpse into the everyday lives of Egyptians. The stone, therefore, was not just a bridge to kings and gods, it was a bridge to people. It is quiet work to study such inscriptions. The mind must move slowly, tracing signs, listening for patterns, and respecting the rhythm of ancient thought. Each hieroglyph carries layers of meaning. A single symbol may represent a sound, a word, or an idea depending on its context. Patience is essential, and the rewards are immense. A temple wall becomes a storybook, a record of devotion, law, and celebration, all preserved in stone for millennia. The Rosetta Stone also revealed the political sophistication of ancient Egypt. Kings understood that power was not only military but religious and symbolic. By issuing decrees to temples, they maintained favor with the priests, ensured loyalty, and stabilized governance. Scholars could see how inscriptions reinforced this system, illustrating a sophisticated culture where religion and state were inseparable. For those listening quietly now, it is worth imagining the soft rhythm of discovery. The Rosetta Stone allowed hieroglyphs to speak again. Each deciphered line carried voices of kings, priests, and ordinary people, telling of their world. The temples became libraries of history, their inscriptions vivid narratives rather than mysterious symbols. Every column, every wall, now held stories waiting to be read, absorbed, and understood. The beauty of this revelation lies in its quiet grandeur. It is not loud or sudden, but steady, patient, unfolding in the calm work of study and reflection. The Rosetta Stone, once buried and overlooked, became the instrument of a profound cultural awakening. Through it, the ancient Egyptian worldview could be studied not as conjecture, but as language, clear and precise. And so, as you drift in the gentle calm of this story, imagine walking along the faded corridors of a sunlit temple. Symbols line the walls, gods, kings, offerings, and prayers. You trace them with your eyes, and for the first time, they speak. A quiet story of devotion, law, and life emerges. The Rosetta Stone made this possible. It did not just reveal names, it revealed a civilization's soul. It reminds us that knowledge can be hidden for centuries, waiting patiently for a key. And when that key is found, the doors swing open slowly, quietly, revealing wonders beyond imagination. The stone's message was no longer limited to a royal decree, it became a portal, allowing the voices of a lost world to reach across time, soft and clear, to anyone willing to listen. In the soft light of understanding, we hear whispers of festivals, prayers, and ceremonies. We see kings making offerings, priests performing sacred duties, and ordinary people participating in the rhythms of life. The Rosetta Stone unlocked not only a language but an entire civilization, quietly, patiently, and beautifully. With the Rosetta Stone deciphered and temple inscriptions beginning to speak once more, the world entered a new era of understanding. The stone was no longer just a slab of black basalt, it had become a bridge between the present and the ancient past, a key that unlocked centuries of silence. Its impact stretched far beyond Egypt, reshaping the way scholars approached history, language, and culture. Imagine the quiet offices and libraries of 19th-century Europe. Scholars leaned over desks, tracing lines, comparing symbols, writing notes. Every new translation of a temple wall, every identification of a pharaoh's name, was celebrated with subdued excitement. The Rosetta Stone had created a ripple effect, where once hieroglyphs had been mysterious and intimidating, now they were accessible, inviting, and full of stories. The stone's greatest legacy lay in its demonstration that patience, observation, and careful reasoning could unlock even the most stubborn mysteries. For centuries, hieroglyphs had been a puzzle, thought to be magical or symbolic alone. Yet the stone proved that logic, comparison, and the recognition of patterns could reveal truth. It was a lesson that applied beyond Egypt, reminding all who study history that silence is not always absence, and that every artifact carries a message if we are willing to listen carefully. Museums became spaces not merely for display, but for study. Scholars could travel to examine inscriptions firsthand, and reproductions of the Rosetta Stone circulated widely. Universities incorporated the study of Egypt into their curricula. Students who once could only marvel at pictures of monuments now had the tools to read and interpret them. The stone had transformed Egyptology from a field of speculation into a rigorous discipline grounded in language and evidence. And yet, the legacy of the Rosetta Stone was not limited to scholars alone. Its story reached the public imagination. Writers, artists, and travelers were inspired by its mystery and its revelation. The idea that a silent stone could speak across millennia captured hearts and minds. People marveled at the thought of civilizations lost to time, now made intelligible through a single, carefully studied artifact. It reminded humanity that knowledge is cumulative, and that even in the quietest corners of history, treasures await discovery. The stone also prompted a reconsideration of Egypt's place in history. Previously, the grandeur of the pyramids and temples was admired visually, but their true meaning remained elusive. Now, inscriptions revealed not just architecture, but governance, law, religion, and daily life. Kings and priests were no longer distant, abstract figures, they had voices, intentions, and personalities. Ordinary people emerged in the texts, their contributions and experiences quietly recorded for posterity. Through the Rosetta Stone, the civilization became vivid and human once again. Another lasting effect was the inspiration it provided to linguists. If one stone could unlock thousands of years of writing, what other lost languages might be waiting? Scholars turned their attention to cuneiform tablets, inscriptions in distant lands, and undeciphered scripts, realizing that systematic study, combined with comparative methods, could yield results. The Rosetta Stone became a model, a demonstration that languages, no matter how long silent, could speak again. The stone's influence was also philosophical. It showed that knowledge is not always linear. Discovery can be accidental, found in a ruined fort, carried by soldiers, transported across empires. Yet even chance discoveries, when paired with careful attention, can reshape entire disciplines. The Rosetta Stone's journey from Egypt to London reminded humanity that understanding is often a process of accumulation, of observation, reflection, and collaboration across borders and generations. It also carried lessons about respect. While the stone's removal from Egypt is now seen as controversial, it was treated with extraordinary care by those who transported and studied it. Scholars preserved copies, documented inscriptions, and eventually shared their findings openly. The story of the stone reminds us that while artifacts may be displaced, their knowledge can be shared, enriching the world. And yet, for all its influence, the Rosetta Stone maintained a quiet dignity. It never shouted its importance. It did not demand attention. Instead, It waited patiently for minds willing to listen. Those who approached it with care were rewarded. Those who hurried, or sought instant understanding, were left with frustration. Its lesson is gentle, almost like a whispered lullaby. True understanding requires patience, attention, and respect. Even today, in the halls of the British Museum, the Rosetta Stone continues to inspire. Visitors gaze upon it, often in hushed awe, tracing the lines of the inscriptions with their eyes. Some think of kings and priests, some of scholars and explorers. Many simply imagine the desert sands where it was first carved, or the long journey that brought it across seas and centuries. It remains a symbol of human curiosity and persistence, a testament to the quiet power of observation and study. Its legacy also extends to Egypt itself. Modern scholars, using the knowledge gained from the Rosetta Stone, can study inscriptions in situ, restoring the voice of their own ancestors. The stone acts as a bridge between cultures and times, connecting past and present, east and west, language and meaning. Through it, the world has a deeper understanding of one of humanity's most remarkable civilizations. The Rosetta Stone, in the end, is more than an artifact. It is a teacher. It teaches patience, careful observation, and respect for the wisdom of the past. It teaches that even the most silent objects can speak if we are willing to listen. And it teaches that knowledge, once discovered, can travel across borders, inspire generations, and change the way we understand the world. As you imagine the stone resting quietly under its protective glass, consider the centuries of silence it endured, the journey it made from Egypt to London, and the patient minds that unlocked its secrets. Each line of hieroglyphs, each demotic character, each word in Greek, contributes to a story far larger than any single person, far richer than any moment in time. The Rosetta Stone's legacy is not only in the knowledge it revealed, but in the way it reminds us to approach history, with care, curiosity, and wonder. Its voice is gentle, yet enduring, echoing across time to all who pause to listen. It is a legacy of discovery, patience, and the quiet triumph of understanding over silence. The Rosetta Stone opened the door to understanding kings, decrees, and temples, but hieroglyphs contained more than the grandeur of royalty. They also held the quiet rhythms of daily life, the small details of work, family, trade, and faith that give humanity its texture. Through the study of inscriptions, scholars began to glimpse the lives of ordinary Egyptians, their routines and dreams, their ceremonies and struggles. Imagine a bustling village along the Nile, the soft sound of water flowing, reeds swaying in the gentle breeze. Farmers plow the fields, their oxen moving slowly through the rich soil, and their children run along the riverbanks. Inscriptions on nearby walls record gifts of grain, measurements of land, and the duties of local officials. Every symbol tells a story of labor, responsibility, and community. These were not the kings or priests celebrated on monuments, but ordinary people living lives of rhythm and quiet importance. Hieroglyphs painted on tombs often show domestic scenes. Families gather around meals, women weave cloth, and men hunt or fish. Each image, accompanied by inscriptions, explains names, occupations, and rituals. It is astonishing to realize that in carefully studying the symbols, scholars could reconstruct the daily lives of people who have been silent for thousands of years. A mother teaching a child, a baker measuring grain, a craftsman shaping stone, these moments, small and personal, survive in the stone records, waiting to be understood. Even mundane details carried significance. Markets, trade routes, and taxes were recorded in demotic script, the practical writing used by officials. These inscriptions, often overlooked, reveal the economy of the Nile Valley, the flow of goods, and the responsibilities of merchants and scribes. The Rosetta Stone's principles allowed scholars to decipher these texts, connecting abstract symbols to real human activities. What once seemed distant and mysterious became tangible, familiar, and alive. In temples, hieroglyphs described offerings of food, incense, and livestock. The language tells us not only what was offered but how offerings were prepared, how rituals were timed, and how devotion was expressed. Priests and villagers alike participated in these ceremonies. Through careful study, we can imagine the rhythm of religious life, the chanting of prayers, the preparation of sacred meals, and the gentle hum of celebration echoing through temple halls. Even recreation and leisure appear in hieroglyphic inscriptions. Music, dance, and festivals are documented, capturing moments of joy and celebration. Children played games, musicians performed with flutes and harps, and dancers enacted stories of gods and heroes. These details remind us that life in ancient Egypt was full of texture, work and play, devotion and ceremony, challenges and celebration. The Rosetta Stone's role in revealing this life cannot be overstated. By providing the key to hieroglyphs, it allowed scholars to read inscriptions on tombs, stelae, and monuments that describe ordinary existence. Names, professions, and events come alive through the language that had been silent for centuries. The past becomes more than grand monuments, it becomes a tapestry of human experience, rich in its simplicity and depth. Consider, for a moment, a craftsman working in a small workshop, shaping stone for a temple or carving wood for a household shrine. Inscriptions record his name, his skill, and perhaps a brief story of his life. These details survived in stone, unnoticed until the Rosetta Stone unlocked the method to read them. Each discovery is like a quiet whisper, connecting us to a person long gone, yet vividly present through their work. Even agriculture, the lifeblood of Egypt, is revealed through inscriptions. Land measurements, irrigation schedules, and crop records appear in demotic and hieroglyphic texts. Scholars can reconstruct planting seasons, harvest cycles, and the relationship between people and the fertile Nile. Through these symbols, we hear the pulse of a civilization built on patience, rhythm, and an intimate connection with nature. The Rosetta Stone also revealed the social structure of everyday life. Hieroglyphs mention officials, scribes, and local leaders, showing how communities were organized. People paid taxes, performed duties, and participated in civic and religious life. Their names, titles, and deeds survive in symbols etched into stone, silent yet articulate, waiting for understanding. And so, daily life in ancient Egypt emerges not as a vague idea but as a vivid reality. Scholars can see the flow of work, family, and devotion, they can imagine festivals, meals, and celebrations. The quiet details of existence, once inaccessible, now speak softly to us. The Rosetta Stone, in its simplicity and complexity, gave life to these ordinary voices, ensuring they are remembered alongside kings and pharaohs. As we reflect on this chapter, imagine walking through a village, a workshop, or a temple courtyard. You see children playing, farmers tending crops, craftsmen carving wood and stone. You hear the soft rhythms of life, the hum of conversation, the murmur of devotion. All of this, long hidden in symbols, has been revealed because someone, centuries ago, discovered the key. The Rosetta Stone allowed voices to travel across time, whispering the stories of ordinary people who lived, loved, worked, and celebrated under the sun of Egypt. And so, the stone's legacy deepens. Not only does it tell of kings, priests, and laws, but it carries the echoes of life itself, the laughter, labor, and devotion of a civilization that once thrived along the Nile. In its quiet endurance, it reminds us that history is not only about the grand and monumental but also about the intimate, daily moments that define human experience. The Rosetta Stone, patiently wading through centuries of sand, conquest, and scholarly attention, continues to speak. It speaks not only of rulers and gods but also of children, artisans, and farmers. It whispers the ordinary and extraordinary alike, allowing us to imagine a world long gone, yet still alive in the symbols and stories carved into stone. With the Rosetta Stone deciphered and the voices of ancient Egypt beginning to speak once more, scholars found themselves standing at the threshold of a vast, previously silent world. The stone had revealed the principles of hieroglyphic writing, but it was only the beginning. Its greatest gift was the method it provided, a key to unlock countless other texts, inscriptions, and records that had remained indecipherable for centuries. Imagine a quiet library in Paris or London, candlelight softly illuminating shelves filled with copies of inscriptions, drawings, and notes. Scholars lean over their desks, tracing lines of hieroglyphs with careful fingers. Each new text offers the possibility of discovery. The methods developed through the Rosetta Stone, comparison with known languages, attention to cartouches, understanding phonetic signs, could now be applied broadly. This was a moment of quiet revolution in the study of history. Previously, inscriptions scattered across Egypt, Nubia, and even parts of the Mediterranean had been silent. Temples and tombs contained elaborate messages, yet the language was inaccessible. Now, every hieroglyph could be approached with logic and understanding. Scholars began to systematically apply Champollion's principles to texts on stelae, obelisks, and monuments. With each new translation, the story of ancient Egypt grew richer, more detailed, and more vivid. The stone also taught scholars patience. Hieroglyphs are intricate, and their meanings often shift depending on context. A single symbol can represent a sound, an entire word, or a broader concept. Understanding required careful observation, comparison, and reflection. Scholars discovered that rushing through inscriptions led to errors, while a slow, methodical approach revealed the subtle rhythms of the language. It was a lesson in quiet persistence, a gentle reminder that the past speaks slowly and must be listened to attentively. Through these methods, scholars uncovered the wealth of Egyptian literature beyond political decrees. Hymns to gods, spells for the afterlife, philosophical reflections, and practical instructions for daily life, all became readable. Tales of creation, myths of gods, and stories of kings interacting with the divine emerged from temple walls and papyrus scrolls. The Rosetta Stone had provided not only the key to language but also the pathway to imagination, belief, and thought across millennia. Consider the moment a scholar encounters a text in a tomb, previously incomprehensible. Using the Rosetta Stone's principles, symbols are slowly matched to phonetic sounds or ideograms. A pattern emerges. Names of kings, gods, or families become clear. Actions are described. Offerings are recorded. Instructions for rituals and guidance for the afterlife are understood. What was once silent now speaks with clarity, conveying culture, religion, and human experience. This method extended beyond Egypt itself. Scholars applied similar comparative approaches to inscriptions in other ancient languages. The work of deciphering cuneiform in Mesopotamia, Linear B in Greece, and later scripts in the Indus Valley drew inspiration from the Rosetta Stone. It showed that systematic analysis, combined with linguistic knowledge and logical reasoning, could reveal lost voices. A single stone became a model for understanding the broader mysteries of history. Even in Egypt, new discoveries followed quickly once the stone's lessons were understood. Scholars revisited monuments, tombs, and temples, now able to read details previously hidden. Inscriptions on the walls of the Temple of Karnak, the tomb of Tutankhamun, and the obelisk scattered across the Nile Valley yielded histories of kings, stories of gods, and records of daily life. The language was no longer a barrier. The civilization, once distant, felt present, alive, and intelligible. The stone also encouraged collaboration. Scholars shared notes, copies, and observations, building on each other's work. A symbol identified in one tomb might appear in another, across miles or decades, allowing patterns to be established. Knowledge expanded incrementally, quietly, like a ripple across still water. Each careful observation, each verified translation, reinforced the growing understanding of Egypt's rich and complex history. Even the study of demotic benefited greatly. The practical, everyday script of Egyptian society had long been neglected. Now, using insights from the Rosetta Stone, scholars could read contracts, tax records, letters, and legal documents. These texts revealed the rhythms of daily life in a way previously inaccessible. Farmers, merchants, artisans, and officials emerged as individuals with names, roles, and stories, an intimate portrait of society alongside the grandeur of kings and temples. As this quiet revolution unfolded, the public also became fascinated. Translations of texts were published, museums displayed copies of inscriptions, and readers marveled at the ability to read the voices of ancient people. The Rosetta Stone had begun as a puzzle, but now it had sparked a cultural awakening, making history tangible, personal, and emotionally resonant. It was no longer a distant past, it was a world that could be explored, understood, and appreciated. The stone's legacy extended beyond the academic realm. It inspired writers, artists, and historians to seek connections across time and culture. The idea that a single artifact could unlock centuries of knowledge reminded humanity that patience, observation, and curiosity are powerful tools. It showed that what seems silent and incomprehensible may only require the right key, applied with care, to speak again. In the calm reflection of history, it is remarkable to consider the ripple effect. One stone, one key, could change the study of an entire civilization. It demonstrates that discovery is often incremental, collective, and patiently pursued. And as these lessons were applied to other texts, the world began to appreciate the depth and richness of human history on an entirely new scale. The Rosetta Stone, through its quiet power, had not only revealed a language but had also opened a method for understanding. Its impact reverberates even today, reminding scholars and dreamers alike that patience, curiosity, and careful observation are the most reliable guides through the silence of the past. The decipherment of the Rosetta Stone did more than illuminate the ancient Egyptian language, it laid the foundation for an entire field of study. Modern Egyptology, as we know it today, owes much to the quiet brilliance of those who listened to the stone and patiently unraveled its secrets. What had once been a landscape of mystery and conjecture became a structured discipline, guided by careful observation, comparison, and scholarship. Imagine a study lined with bookshelves, filled with journals and papers. Scholars sit quietly, copying inscriptions, examining temple walls, and cataloging artifacts. The Rosetta Stone, resting under protective glass, watches over their work like a silent teacher. It reminds them that knowledge is cumulative, built layer by layer, discovery upon discovery. Through its lessons, scholars learn that understanding a civilization requires more than admiration, it requires method, patience, and respect. Modern Egyptology grew from this meticulous study. Researchers realized that understanding hieroglyphs was only the beginning. They began to map the chronology of pharaohs, understand religious practices, and reconstruct political structures. Every temple, tomb, and monument became a text to be read, a story to be understood. The Rosetta Stone had given them the first key, now they were unlocking the rest of the civilization, stone by stone, inscription by inscription. The discipline also became interdisciplinary. Scholars drew upon linguistics, archaeology, history, art, and anthropology. Understanding Egypt was no longer a matter of translation alone, it required context. What did a symbol signify in religious practice? How did a ritual reflect societal structure? How did trade, agriculture, and governance intersect? The Rosetta Stone's method taught scholars to ask these questions and to seek answers across multiple forms of evidence. Consider the work of archaeologists excavating tombs. Once the hieroglyphs could be read, the purpose and significance of burial practices became clearer. Inscriptions explained who the tomb belonged to, the titles and achievements of the deceased, and the rituals necessary for a safe passage into the afterlife. Every artifact recovered, a piece of pottery, a fragment of a statue, a ceremonial object, could be understood in context. Egyptology became a science of stories, with the Rosetta Stone as its cornerstone. Museums played a critical role in building the field. Exhibits became more than displays, they became classrooms. Scholars and the public alike could engage with artifacts, trace symbols, and learn the histories they recorded. Replicas of inscriptions allowed students to practice reading hieroglyphs, while journals disseminated discoveries to researchers worldwide. The stone's influence extended beyond its physical presence, it became a model for research, education, and collaboration. The decipherment of the Rosetta Stone did more than illuminate the ancient Egyptian language, it laid the foundation for an entire field of study. Modern Egyptology, as we know it today, owes much to the quiet brilliance of those who listened to the stone and patiently unraveled its secrets. What had once been a landscape of mystery and conjecture became a structured discipline, guided by careful observation, comparison, and scholarship. Imagine a study lined with bookshelves, filled with journals and papers. Scholars sit quietly, copying inscriptions, examining temple walls, and cataloging artifacts. The Rosetta Stone, resting under protective glass, watches over their work like a silent teacher. It reminds them that knowledge is cumulative, built layer by layer, discovery upon discovery. Through its lessons, scholars learn that understanding a civilization requires more than admiration, it requires method, patience, and respect. Modern Egyptology grew from this meticulous study. Researchers realized that understanding hieroglyphs was only the beginning. They began to map the chronology of pharaohs, understand religious practices, and reconstruct political structures. Every temple, tomb, and monument became a text to be read, a story to be understood. The Rosetta Stone had given them the first key, now they were unlocking the rest of the civilization, stone by stone, inscription by inscription. The discipline also became interdisciplinary. Scholars drew upon linguistics, archaeology, history, art, and anthropology. Understanding Egypt was no longer a matter of translation alone, it required context. What did a symbol signify in religious practice? How did a ritual reflect societal structure? How did trade, agriculture, and governance intersect? The Rosetta Stone's method taught scholars to ask these questions and to seek answers across multiple forms of evidence. Consider the work of archaeologists excavating tombs. Once the hieroglyphs could be read, the purpose and significance of burial practices became clearer. Inscriptions explained who the tomb belonged to, the titles and achievements of the deceased, and the rituals necessary for a safe passage into the afterlife. Every artifact recovered, a piece of pottery, a fragment of a statue, a ceremonial object, could be understood in context. Egyptology became a science of stories, with the Rosetta Stone as its cornerstone. Museums played a critical role in building the field. Exhibits became more than displays, they became classrooms. Scholars and the public alike could engage with artifacts, trace symbols, and learn the histories they recorded. Replicas of inscriptions allowed students to practice reading hieroglyphs, while journals disseminated discoveries to researchers worldwide. The stone's influence extended beyond its physical presence, it became a model for research, education, and collaboration. As we rest with this chapter, imagine the quiet dedication of scholars over generations, copying inscriptions, interpreting symbols, discussing hypotheses in low voices, and carefully preserving artifacts. Each step, each observation, is part of a chain that begins with the Rosetta Stone and extends into the present day. The field of Egyptology stands as a testament to human curiosity, patience, and the enduring power of history. And so, the Rosetta Stone's legacy is not only in what it revealed about language and civilization but also in how it shaped the way we study the past. Its silent voice continues to guide us, teaching that discovery is a process, knowledge is cumulative, and understanding comes through careful attention and reflection. Through it, ancient Egypt is not just history, it is a world that can be explored, understood, and cherished, quietly speaking to all who are willing to listen. The Rosetta Stone, in its quiet endurance, offers more than the language of kings and priests. It provides a bridge, a gentle connection between the distant past and our present understanding. By deciphering the inscriptions, humanity learned not only about ancient Egypt but also about the shared threads of culture, communication, and human experience that stretch across time. Imagine walking through a sunlit Egyptian temple. The warm light illuminates intricate carvings, hieroglyphs tracing walls, columns, and altars. Every symbol holds meaning, every inscription tells a story. Without the Rosetta Stone, these voices remain silent, a muted echo of a distant world. With the stone, they speak. They remind us that, although centuries separate us, the hopes, fears, and daily lives of ancient Egyptians are not entirely foreign, they are human. One of the most profound impacts of the Rosetta Stone is the insight it provides into ancient Egyptian belief systems. Hieroglyphs reveal rituals performed to honor gods, offerings made to secure favor, and prayers for protection in the afterlife. These inscriptions show a civilization deeply concerned with harmony, balance, and the continuity of life. Through these texts, we perceive values, ideals, and practices that resonate even today, offering perspective on the spiritual and cultural foundations of human society. Beyond religion, the inscriptions reveal governance and social structure. Laws, decrees, and records of administrative decisions show that ancient Egypt was organized, complex, and aware of the importance of civic order. Kings and officials were responsible for justice, economy, and protection of their people. The texts reveal their priorities, the challenges they faced, and their efforts to maintain stability. Through the Rosetta Stone, modern readers gain insight into the evolution of leadership, law, and bureaucracy, lessons relevant across centuries. Daily life, too, emerges from the stone's legacy. Inscriptions tell of families, occupations, markets, and celebrations. Farmers tilled the soil along the Nile, craftsmen shaped stone and wood, and merchants traded goods, just as we pursue work and livelihoods today. Children played, musicians performed, and festivals brought communities together. These details remind us that, despite the distance of time, the rhythms of life, work, celebration, devotion, remain familiar. The stone offers a mirror, reflecting our own human experiences across millennia. Cultural understanding also arises from recognizing the subtle artistry embedded in hieroglyphs. Each symbol is carefully crafted, often combining phonetic and ideographic meaning. This attention to detail conveys aesthetic and intellectual sophistication. By studying these inscriptions, modern observers gain appreciation for ancient Egyptian creativity, design, and ingenuity. The Rosetta Stone reveals that writing is not merely a practical tool, it is a medium for art, thought, and identity. The Rosetta Stone has also inspired a sense of connection between civilizations. By unlocking the language of Egypt, scholars could compare Egyptian texts with those of Mesopotamia, Greece, and Rome. Patterns of trade, cultural exchange, and shared ideas emerge. Humanity is seen as interconnected, with civilizations influencing one another in subtle and profound ways. The stone, in this sense, acts as a bridge not only across time but across space, connecting cultures that shaped human history. Its role in education and scholarship cannot be overstated. Students of history, linguistics, and archaeology gain a foundational understanding of decipherment, critical analysis, and cultural interpretation. The Rosetta Stone teaches that knowledge is cumulative, one discovery builds upon another, one insight illuminates the next. By studying it, learners develop patience, curiosity, and respect for complexity, qualities essential not only in academia but in life. The stone also fosters empathy. Reading the words of ancient Egyptians, of kings, priests, and everyday people, creates a sense of intimacy with a civilization long past. We imagine their voices, their joys, their struggles. We see human aspirations mirrored in their inscriptions. The distance of centuries shrinks, and history becomes a dialogue rather than a record. The Rosetta Stone allows us to feel, in a quiet way, the pulse of a long-gone society. Consider the symbolic power of a single stone bridging millennia. Carved thousands of years ago, buried under desert sands, transported across seas, and eventually displayed in a museum, it has traveled far. Yet its essence remains intact, a message, a key, a story preserved for the patient and attentive. It is a testament to the enduring capacity of human expression, reminding us that words, symbols, and ideas can transcend both time and place. Even in today's globalized world, the Rosetta Stone has lessons for cultural dialogue. Understanding another society. Its language, beliefs, and practices requires patience, attention, and openness. Just as Champollion patiently unlocked hieroglyphs, we must approach cultures and histories with care, humility, and respect. Misinterpretation diminishes meaning, careful study reveals truth. The stone models a quiet, deliberate approach to understanding that is universally applicable. As we reflect, imagine reading an inscription together, a royal decree, a prayer, a record of harvest. Each line connects us with a human mind long ago, illustrating values, priorities, and concerns remarkably similar to our own. The Rosetta Stone, in its gentle endurance, teaches that understanding is not an immediate gift but a process, a patient dialogue between past and present. Its cultural legacy extends beyond academic study. Artists, writers, and filmmakers have drawn inspiration from the stone's message, creating works that celebrate Egypt's language, art, and history. It has become an icon of human curiosity, resilience, and the power of knowledge. Its quiet influence resonates through classrooms, libraries, museums, and even the imagination of those who have never seen it in person. Ultimately, the Rosetta Stone reminds us that the past is not silent. It whispers through inscriptions, artifacts, and discoveries. By listening carefully, we build bridges across time, connecting with people who lived, loved, worked, and worshipped thousands of years ago. It teaches patience, empathy, and respect, and it encourages us to seek understanding, even in places where knowledge seems hidden or inaccessible. As we conclude this chapter, picture the stone in its glass case, dark, polished, and unassuming. It bears a decree, yes, but also a timeless lesson. It shows how careful observation, dedication, and respect for complexity allow us to connect with the thoughts, lives, and cultures of others. The Rosetta Stone is more than a tool, it is a bridge, linking past and present, inviting all who pause to listen into the quiet, enduring world of ancient Egypt. The Rosetta Stone, resting quietly in the museum, seems modest at first glance, yet its influence extends far beyond its physical presence. Its impact on scholarship, language, and cultural understanding has rippled across the world, inspiring discoveries in distant lands and opening minds to the wonders of human history. It is a symbol not just of Egypt, but of the enduring quest for knowledge. Imagine scholars across Europe, Asia, and the Americas, studying the principles revealed by the stone. The method of decipherment, careful comparison, phonetic analysis, and attentive observation, became a model for unlocking other ancient languages. Historians and linguists began to realize that languages once thought impenetrable could be understood, that civilizations long silent could be brought back to life. The Rosetta Stone taught a fundamental lesson: patience, logic, and persistence can overcome even the greatest mysteries. Beyond Egypt, its influence can be seen in the study of cuneiform tablets from Mesopotamia. For centuries, these inscriptions remained enigmatic, but the success of Champollion's work inspired scholars to apply similar methods of comparison and deduction. Slowly, the languages of Sumer, Akkad, and Babylon began to speak again. Kings, priests, and common people emerged from these inscriptions, offering insights into governance, religion, trade, and daily life. The Rosetta Stone's quiet guidance helped ignite a worldwide awakening to the value of decipherment. In Greece and Crete, the study of Linear B, a long-lost script, benefited indirectly from the example of the Rosetta Stone. Researchers approached the inscriptions with a mindset informed by Champollion's achievement, looking for patterns, identifying symbols that represented sounds, and comparing contexts. By adopting this methodical approach, scholars could finally read documents that had remained unreadable for millennia, revealing details of Mycenaean civilization, administration, and economy. Even in the Americas, explorers and linguists drew inspiration from the stone. Indigenous scripts, such as Mayan hieroglyphs, had long puzzled scholars. The Rosetta Stone provided not just a model of decipherment, but hope, that persistent observation and careful analysis could uncover meaning in symbols once thought indecipherable. Over decades, researchers slowly reconstructed the Mayan calendar, mythology, and history, demonstrating that the principles of decoding the past are universal. The stone's global influence is not limited to language. It inspired a broader appreciation for cultural preservation and historical inquiry. Archaeologists realized that artifacts, inscriptions, and ruins are not merely objects or curiosities, they are voices waiting to be heard. Each discovery is a puzzle, each symbol a message, and the methods applied to the Rosetta Stone became a template for interpreting other civilizations with respect, patience, and rigor. Its impact also extends to education and public understanding. Students across the world learn about the Rosetta Stone not merely as a historical artifact, but as a symbol of intellectual perseverance. It illustrates how humans can overcome obstacles to knowledge, how curiosity and careful reasoning illuminate the unknown. Exhibitions and textbooks describe its journey, its discovery, and its decipherment, teaching generations to value learning, observation, and inquiry. Consider the ripple effect. One stone in the sands of Egypt inspires scholars in Europe to decode hieroglyphs, which in turn informs research in Mesopotamia, Greece, and Mesoamerica. Across continents and centuries, the principles of understanding travel quietly but powerfully, connecting human civilizations in ways that transcend time and geography. The Rosetta Stone is a testament to the universality of human curiosity and the shared endeavor of knowledge. Artists and writers have also felt its influence. The stone has been depicted in paintings, novels, and films, not merely as an object but as a symbol of discovery, patience, and cultural awakening. Its story reminds us that one discovery can illuminate entire worlds, that understanding is both a process and a reward. Across literature and art, the Rosetta Stone continues to inspire reflection on history, language, and human achievement. Its lessons extend beyond academia and art into philosophy. The stone teaches that silence is not absence. Knowledge, like the voices encoded in hieroglyphs, may wait centuries to be heard. Discovery often requires careful attention, collaboration, and humility. One must observe patiently, respect the material, and think critically. These are not just lessons for scholars, they are reminders for all who seek understanding in any field of life. Moreover, the Rosetta Stone bridges cultures. By decoding Egyptian hieroglyphs, scholars could compare them with Greek, demotic, and other ancient texts, seeing connections between societies and appreciating their interactions. Trade, diplomacy, religion, and art all reveal patterns of human engagement across regions. In this way, the stone emphasizes that civilizations are not isolated, they are networks of influence, creativity, and communication. Even today, technology has extended the stone's influence worldwide. Digital archives, 3D imaging, and virtual exhibitions allow people across continents to study and explore the inscriptions. Scholars collaborate online, share discoveries, and build global databases. The methods inspired by the Rosetta Stone continue to inform modern research, proving that its quiet wisdom remains relevant, accessible, and transformative. The Rosetta Stone story also carries a message of resilience. Buried, lost, and eventually rediscovered, it endured centuries of neglect before revealing its secrets. It teaches us that even knowledge that seems hidden forever can resurface if approached with care and determination. Across the globe, researchers continue to seek answers in overlooked or forgotten texts, inspired by the example of this humble yet extraordinary artifact. Finally, the stone reminds us that history is not distant or irrelevant. It is alive in the symbols, texts, and artifacts we uncover. It connects humans across time, teaching lessons about creativity, governance, religion, and daily life. Through the Rosetta Stone, we learn that civilizations speak to one another, that learning is cumulative, and that the patient pursuit of knowledge can change the way we understand ourselves and our world. As we reflect, picture the stone quietly resting in the museum. Its inscriptions, once indecipherable, now speak clearly to people across continents. It inspires discoveries worldwide, fostering understanding, empathy, and appreciation for human history. Through this modest slab of basalt, the voices of Egypt reach far beyond their time, inviting the world to listen, learn, and connect. The Rosetta Stone, though centuries old, continues to teach, inspire, and guide us. Beyond its historical and linguistic significance, it has become a touchstone for technological innovation, demonstrating how modern tools can preserve, study, and share the knowledge of the past. Its quiet endurance reminds us that even ancient artifacts can benefit from careful observation enhanced by new methods. Imagine a softly lit laboratory, where digital scanners, cameras, and computers hum quietly. Researchers study the stone without touching it, capturing its every detail in high resolution. These technologies allow scholars to preserve the inscriptions digitally, ensuring that even if the stone itself were lost or damaged, its language and meaning could endure. The Rosetta Stone, once deciphered by eye and hand, now speaks through pixels, algorithms, and data, bridging millennia through modern innovation. Digital imaging has revealed details invisible to the naked eye. Faint lines, eroded characters, and subtle marks, previously overlooked, now emerge clearly. Scholars can zoom in on each hieroglyph, examine it in 3 dimensions, and compare it to other inscriptions worldwide. This technology enhances the stone's original power, allowing more precise translations and deeper understanding. Every crack, every groove in the basalt is a clue, and modern methods ensure that none of these clues are lost to time. 3D modeling and virtual reality have also expanded the stone's influence. Students and enthusiasts can explore its inscriptions from anywhere in the world, turning it gently in virtual space, observing details from multiple angles. Museums no longer need to confine its audience to physical proximity. Through digital technology, the stone reaches millions, allowing people to engage with ancient Egypt intimately, as if standing right beside it in the British Museum. Moreover, computational linguistics has applied the lessons of the Rosetta Stone to decipher other lost languages. Algorithms can analyze patterns in symbols, identify repetitions, and suggest translations, building on the principles Champollion used by hand. These tools accelerate discovery, making it possible to study scripts too vast or complex for manual analysis alone. The stone's influence, therefore, extends into the cutting edge of scholarship, demonstrating that ancient knowledge and modern technology complement one another. The stone's preservation has also benefited from scientific advances in material study. Chemical analysis of its basalt, understanding the effects of humidity, light, and handling, ensures that the artifact remains intact for future generations. Each precaution allows the stone to continue teaching, reminding us that preservation is not passive but active. Knowledge survives when we care for it carefully, just as curiosity and diligence have preserved its meaning for centuries. Technology also enables collaboration on an unprecedented scale. Digital databases allow scholars worldwide to share images, transcriptions, and analyses of inscriptions related to the Rosetta Stone. Insights discovered in one country can inform research in another, and translations can be cross-checked instantly. The stone's lessons, once limited to a few scholars in Europe, now reach a global community, fostering cooperation, understanding, and shared discovery. Even beyond language, technology allows us to reconstruct ancient environments. By analyzing inscriptions alongside archaeological data, researchers can create immersive models of Egyptian temples, towns, and landscapes. We can imagine the bustling streets along the Nile, the sounds of ritual music, the aroma of offerings, and the rhythms of daily life. The Rosetta Stone acts as a key, unlocking these reconstructions, and technology allows us to experience them vividly without ever disturbing the original artifacts. Digital preservation also protects against loss caused by natural disasters, accidents, or human conflict. The stone, while physically resilient, could never fully survive all threats across centuries. High-resolution scans and 3D models ensure that even if the original were damaged, its knowledge would endure. This foresight extends the stone's legacy into the future, making it a permanent resource for study, education, and inspiration. The stone's modern story teaches another lesson: the union of tradition and innovation. Ancient wisdom meets contemporary tools. The principles Champollion applied manually are amplified by computers, cameras, and digital methods. The stone's inscriptions, carved thousands of years ago, are preserved, analyzed, and shared in ways unimaginable to its creators. Yet the core remains unchanged: patient observation, careful analysis, and respect for the artifact. Technology does not replace scholarship, it enhances it. The Rosetta Stone also inspires young learners to explore history, archaeology, and technology together. Children and students can engage with interactive programs, virtually rotate the stone, trace symbols with a stylus, or decode inscriptions using educational software. The stone teaches that learning is timeless, that curiosity is universal, and that knowledge, once preserved, can ignite imagination across generations. In museums, technology augments the visitor experience. Touch screens, virtual tours, and digital annotations provide context without the need to physically touch the stone. Visitors learn not only the history of the inscriptions but the methods by which they were deciphered and preserved. The stone becomes a living classroom, quietly communicating with those who pause to listen, regardless of age, location, or background. Finally, the Rosetta Stone demonstrates the continuity of human endeavor. From ancient scribes carving decrees, to 19th-century scholars deciphering them, to modern researchers using computers and 3D models, each generation contributes to the preservation and understanding of human knowledge. Technology becomes a partner in this chain, ensuring that the stone's lessons and Egypt's history remain vibrant, accessible, and enduring. As we reflect in this quiet moment, imagine the Rosetta Stone, centuries old yet fully alive in the digital age. Its inscriptions whisper across time and space, now captured in data, images, and virtual reconstructions. Through careful observation, technological innovation, and persistent curiosity, humanity preserves and extends its message. The stone, humble yet profound, teaches that knowledge can endure when it is cherished, studied, and shared, bridging the past and the future with a gentle, enduring voice. The Rosetta Stone is more than an artifact or a tool for scholars. Over the centuries, it has quietly captured the imagination of people across the world. Its story has traveled beyond museums, textbooks, and lecture halls, inspiring literature, art, films, and popular culture. It has become a symbol of discovery, patience, and the enduring human desire to connect with the past. Imagine a quiet evening in a library, the soft glow of a lamp illuminating pages of a book that tells the story of the stone. The narrative is more than historical, it is almost magical. A simple slab of basalt, covered in inscriptions, buried under centuries of sand, rediscovered, and finally deciphered. The stone's journey becomes a story of human curiosity and intellect, a tale that captivates and encourages exploration. In literature, the Rosetta Stone appears as a metaphor for understanding the unknown. Writers have drawn parallels between its inscriptions and the mysteries of life, suggesting that patience, observation, and determination can reveal hidden truths. In novels and essays, it symbolizes the triumph of human insight over obscurity, reminding readers that what seems indecipherable may simply require the right perspective. Its presence in literature bridges history and imagination, bringing ancient voices into dialogue with modern minds. Films and documentaries have also celebrated the stone. From historical dramas depicting its discovery to educational programs exploring its significance, the Rosetta Stone is presented as a key to the mysteries of Egypt. Its story resonates with viewers because it combines adventure, intellect, and cultural heritage. Audiences are drawn into the process of discovery, imagining the scholars who spent years meticulously deciphering its inscriptions, connecting the past to the present. Visual arts, too, have been inspired by the stone. Paintings, illustrations, and digital artworks often depict the Rosetta Stone as a symbol of mystery and revelation. Artists explore its textures, colors, and inscriptions, emphasizing the elegance and complexity of its carvings. In some works, it is portrayed alongside pharaohs, scribes, or temples, highlighting its central role in unlocking ancient Egypt's secrets. The stone becomes both subject and symbol, a bridge across time and imagination. The Rosetta Stone's influence extends into education and public engagement. Museums, exhibitions, and interactive programs use it to teach history, archaeology, and linguistics. Students trace hieroglyphs, examine facsimiles, and explore virtual reconstructions of Egyptian temples. Through these experiences, the stone inspires curiosity, patience, and analytical thinking. Its story demonstrates that learning is a journey, often quiet and incremental, yet ultimately rewarding. Even popular culture has absorbed the stone's symbolism. In games, puzzles, and interactive media, it often represents codes to be unlocked or mysteries to be solved. This playful engagement mirrors the real process of discovery, connecting the joy of exploration with the rigors of scholarship. The Rosetta Stone, in these contexts, reminds us that understanding the world requires observation, logic, and creativity, a lesson both ancient and timeless. Its cultural presence also encourages empathy with the past. By decoding its inscriptions, scholars revealed not only royal decrees but also stories of everyday life, rituals, and beliefs. Popular narratives highlight these human elements, helping modern audiences imagine the lives, hopes, and struggles of people who lived thousands of years ago. In this way, the stone becomes a bridge not only across time but across human experience, connecting us with lives once silent. The stone also inspires technological and artistic innovation. 3D models, virtual tours, and digital recreations of its inscriptions allow people around the world to interact with it in new ways. These projects are often collaborative, merging scholarship, creativity, and technology. The Rosetta Stone continues to spark ideas and projects, demonstrating that even an ancient artifact can influence contemporary thought and practice. In music and performance art, the stone occasionally serves as a muse. Compositions and theatrical pieces explore the themes of language, mystery, and communication, evoking the sense of discovery associated with deciphering ancient texts. These artistic interpretations reinforce the stone's cultural resonance, showing that it speaks not only through inscriptions but through inspiration across mediums. The Rosetta Stone also reminds us of the universality of human curiosity. Its story transcends geography and time, drawing interest from scholars, students, artists, and the public alike. It embodies the idea that understanding requires diligence, observation, and imagination. In every cultural reference, whether a novel, a painting, a film, or a digital program, the stone continues to teach the same quiet lesson it whispered to Champollion, that patience and insight unlock hidden worlds. Consider the way the stone is displayed in the museum today. Crowds gather, cameras capture, and guides narrate its story. Even in this busy environment, it retains a calm dignity. It is a teacher, a muse, and a connection to the ancient past. Visitors often pause, reflecting on the centuries it has witnessed, the hands that carved it, and the minds that deciphered it. In its quiet presence, one senses both the weight of history and the timelessness of discovery. Ultimately, the Rosetta Stone's cultural impact lies in its ability to inspire. It reminds us that knowledge is a treasure, often hidden, waiting for those who are patient, curious, and diligent. Its inscriptions speak across millennia, connecting scholars and artists, historians and students, and ordinary people with the distant world of ancient Egypt. In this way, the stone is alive not just as a historical object, but as a source of ongoing fascination, learning, and creativity. As we conclude this chapter, picture the stone in your mind. Its inscriptions whisper softly, telling stories of kings and scribes, priests and farmers. Its journey from the sands of Egypt to the halls of the museum is a tale of discovery, perseverance, and human ingenuity. Across books, films, and artworks, its influence continues to grow, reminding us that even the quietest artifacts can leave a profound mark on culture, imagination, and the shared human story. As we reach the final chapter of our journey, we pause to reflect on the enduring legacy of the Rosetta Stone. From its creation in ancient Egypt to its rediscovery and decipherment centuries later, the stone has quietly bridged time, cultures, and languages. Its inscriptions, once silent, now speak not only of kings and priests but of the human drive to understand, to connect, and to preserve knowledge. Picture the stone in its glass case, bathed in gentle museum light. Visitors pause, leaning forward to study the carved symbols. They sense something profound. This is more than an artifact. It is a story, a message, a whisper from the past. Its legacy is measured not merely in historical facts but in the way it continues to inspire curiosity, scholarship, and imagination across generations. The Rosetta Stone's immediate legacy was the unlocking of the ancient Egyptian language. Hieroglyphs, demotic script, and Greek inscriptions revealed the voices of a civilization long thought inaccessible. Scholars reconstructed histories, recorded the lives of pharaohs, priests, and common people, and pieced together cultural and religious practices. The stone provided not only a key but a method, an enduring example of systematic analysis, careful observation, and logical reasoning. Beyond language, the stone inspired the development of Egyptology as a structured field of study. Universities, research institutions, and museums around the world established departments devoted to the study of ancient Egypt. Archaeologists and historians adopted rigorous methods, documenting, cataloging, and analyzing inscriptions, monuments, and artifacts. The Rosetta Stone was both the spark and the foundation of this growing discipline, teaching generations of scholars how to uncover the past with patience and precision. Its influence reaches further still, extending to the study of other ancient languages and scripts. From cuneiform in Mesopotamia to Linear B in Greece, from Mayan glyphs in Mesoamerica to other undeciphered texts, researchers applied the principles championed by Champollion. The stone demonstrated that what seems impossible to understand can often be revealed through careful, systematic study. It taught the world that patience, persistence, and curiosity are keys to unlocking knowledge. The Rosetta Stone's cultural impact is equally profound. Writers, artists, filmmakers, and educators have used it as a symbol of discovery, persistence, and human ingenuity. It appears in novels, documentaries, paintings, and interactive exhibits, reminding us that learning is a journey, and that even the most silent objects can speak when approached with attention and respect. Its story inspires imagination as much as it informs history. Technological advances have ensured that the stone's legacy continues into the digital age. High-resolution imaging, 3D modeling, and virtual reality allow people worldwide to explore the inscriptions without touching the stone. Scholars can collaborate across continents, share data instantly, and preserve its message for future generations. Technology amplifies the stone's voice, proving that ancient artifacts and modern methods are partners in the ongoing pursuit of understanding. Moreover, the Rosetta Stone teaches us about the human experience itself. Its inscriptions reveal devotion, governance, law, artistry, and daily life. They remind us that across centuries, people lived, worked, celebrated, and sought meaning much as we do today. In reading the stone, we see continuity in human aspirations, values, and creativity. It is a bridge not only across languages but across the human heart and mind. Its symbolic significance is timeless. The stone represents the triumph of curiosity over silence, the victory of understanding over obscurity. It demonstrates that even a modest slab of basalt, quietly resting for centuries, can profoundly impact the course of human knowledge. Its lesson is simple yet powerful. That knowledge waits patiently for those willing to observe, think, and persist. The Rosetta Stone also invites reflection on preservation and responsibility. Its survival and accessibility are thanks to generations of scholars, explorers, and caretakers who recognized its value. Today, its care continues through careful environmental controls, digital archives, and responsible museum practices. By preserving it, we honor not only the artifact but the ideas, voices, and wisdom it embodies. Perhaps its most enduring legacy lies in inspiration. The story of the Rosetta Stone encourages us to embrace curiosity, to listen attentively to the past, and to approach the unknown with humility and diligence. It teaches that obstacles can be overcome with patience, that silence is often temporary, and that even the smallest clues can illuminate vast histories. For students, researchers, and dreamers, it is a reminder that discovery is both a challenge and a reward. In the quiet reflection of history, the Rosetta Stone whispers a universal message: human achievement is cumulative, knowledge is precious, and understanding is possible when we approach the world thoughtfully and respectfully. Its inscriptions continue to echo, reminding us that we are part of an unbroken chain connecting the past, present, and future. As we conclude, imagine the stone resting silently, its inscriptions illuminated by soft light. Across its surface, ancient voices speak again, telling stories of life, belief, governance, and creativity. Its legacy is vast yet intimate, reaching from the scribes of Egypt to modern scholars, from museum visitors to curious minds everywhere. It is a testament to human patience, intelligence, and imagination. The Rosetta Stone has traveled across centuries, continents, and disciplines. It has transformed language studies, inspired fields of research, and captivated the cultural imagination. Its message is enduring, a quiet yet profound reminder that knowledge can survive time, that curiosity fuels discovery, and that the human desire to understand transcends generations. In the calm stillness of this moment, we can feel the stone's voice. It speaks softly, across time, urging us to observe, to question, to listen. Its legacy is not only the knowledge it unlocked but the inspiration it continues to provide. The Rosetta Stone reminds us that even the most silent objects, when approached with care and attention, can share their stories, illuminate history, and connect humanity across the vast expanse of time. And so, the Rosetta Stone endures, not just as an artifact in a museum, but as a bridge across millennia, a keeper of voices, and a symbol of human perseverance and understanding. It invites us all, quietly, to listen and learn, reminding us that the past, though distant, is always within reach for those who care to observe, reflect, and dream.